All right, everybody, good late morning. Welcome back. It's time for the second half of our look at college football prospects. Quick reminder that my stream with the Hawks Nest will go up in about an hour, and we will talk about the Cardinals game and the upcoming Jets game. We moved it to Wednesday because of Thanksgiving. So, in case you didn't see my video last night, then, well, now you know. Okay, so see you guys in an hour for that. A little less than an hour now, but we got some defensive players to talk about. It was an okay week overall for the defense. Not as good as some previous weeks, if we're being honest. I had to kind of search around a little bit to find guys. Not at nose tackle, though. It was the usual suspects here. There are two guys that kind of transcend nose tackle because they are so good. And they're probably out of our reach because they are going to be drafted so high. But I like talking about them anyway, and they're really good players. Deonte Walker of Kentucky playing the Texas Longhorns, who, I mean, that is life on hard mode. And he had 4 tackles, including 1 for loss, 3 pressures as a nose tackle. He doesn't always play nose tackle, but he plays nose tackle some. And he also recovered a fumble. So he's pretty active out there, making plays, trying to keep Kentucky in the game. Ultimately didn't work, 31 points allowed, and Texas did run the ball all over Kentucky, 250 yards, but hard for me to kill Walker at a certain point, 71.8 PFF grade. And the other guy, Kenneth Grant, now, he had very, very easy competition this week with Michigan. 3 tackles, 1 for loss. And the 1 tackle for loss was a sack. So you always like to see your nose tackles get a little bit of pressure. And Michigan only allowed 6 points and 11 rushing yards. So hard to move them. 0.5 yards per carry. 63 PFF grade, which is pretty lackluster, admittedly, but he continues to be a guy that I like. And he's probably a first-round pick. Okay, edge rushers now. And this was not the greatest week for these edge rushers, I will admit. There was nobody out there who had like 8 pressures or 9 pressures. We've seen that a little bit. I didn't find anything like that. Jack Sawyer had a good game for Ohio State. 4 tackles and a sack and a half. 4 pressures total. And Ohio State's defense, they shut them down. 15 points, 68 passing yards. And they're playing a good team. Indiana's good. They didn't look at this week, but that's a good team. 3.8 yards per pass. 73.2 PFF grade. So, I mean, Jack Sawyer continues to stack good games. And he may end up being a first-round pick. Maybe he gets penalized because he has a really good teammate at OSU on the other side, JT. But Sawyer, also creeping up, very good. Princely Umanmian of Mississippi, Ole Miss. Good game from him, 7 tackles, including a sack. 4 pressures. Ole Miss only allowed 24 points, 180 passing yards, which was actually a lot per pass, but you're not really worried about that. When you're allowing less than 200 passing yards in a game, you're probably doing okay for yourself. 70.2 PFF grade. Michael Williams of Georgia, one of my favorite players. Not far from his most dominant game or anything like that, but 5 tackles and a sack, 2 pressures. Georgia's defense pretty shut down, 21 points allowed, which sounds like a lot, but they scored 59. The other team's going to score eventually. 125 passing yards allowed, 7.4 yards per pass. 82.1. So you can kind of see why he didn't have a lot of pressures. The other team didn't throw the ball enough. And James Pierce Jr. remains one of the stars of the show. 4 tackles, 2.5 for loss, including 2 sacks. So that's a pretty dominant game from Pierce. 4 quarterback pressures, and Tennessee allowed 0 points. The donut, 149 passing yards, 4.1 yards per pass. Really dominant pass defense. 87.3, so he's really, really found his gear here. He is off to the races. And final guy, this is a guy we don't talk about as much. We have talked about him before. Donovan Ezuruaku of Boston College. Probably mispronounced that last name, but Donovan Ezuruaku. 6 tackles, including 2 sacks. 4 pressures. Boston College allowed 21 points. And less than 6 yards per pass, 176 yards total, 72.6. So, pretty good from the edge group. We've seen better. Nobody just exploded and just lived in the backfield this week, but it was good. Okay. Linebacker. There was actually quite a bit good at the linebacker spot this week. There were one or two guys I left off. So you've got Jamon Dumas Johnson of Kentucky. Now, Kentucky didn't play a particularly good game, but they're playing a much better team, so I'm not going to kill him for that. And Dumas Johnson accounted for a lot of Kentucky's points. He recovered a fumble and returned it for a touchdown. He had 8 tackles. He did allow 38 yards in coverage, which we don't love, 9.5 yards per target, but you're overmatched a little bit sometimes. Like, I'm gonna give him some credit for taking a fumble back for a touchdown, 65 PFF grade against that Texas team. Deserves some credibility. So in this linebacker class, he is starting to stand out a little bit. I'm not going to go too far with it, but he's good. And let's see, next guy here would be Kobe King of Penn State, the Nittany Lions. He had another pretty nice game for them. 9 tackles, tackle and a half for loss, 3 quarterback pressures, so a lot of stuff happening in the backfield. He got targeted 3 times in this game and only allowed 1 receiving yard, so really clean in coverage. Penn State allowed 25 points. They had to win the game by the skin of their teeth. 107 rushing yards, but only 3.1 yards per carry for Minnesota. 67.3 PFF grade. Good player. Here's an exciting one because this guy is barely going to get drafted according to the aggregate. Francisco Moigoa. He is becoming one of my favorite late round guys. He's been quiet lately, though. Not quiet this week. 12 tackles for Miami. 2 quarterback pressures. Did not get targeted once in coverage. Miami only allowed 14 points and 94 rushing yards, which was 2.4 yards per carry. So, really good run defense, 82.2. That's one of his best games of the year. Lander Barton, interesting one. I put him here before. This week is weird. He only had 2 tackles, but he had an 87-yard pick six and 3 quarterback pressures. So, I feel like when you do that, when you have an 87-yard touchdown back the other way, you got to make it, even if you didn't do much otherwise. And then you have the 3 pressures on top of it, and I feel like, okay, you made some serious plays this week, buddy. 34 receiving yards allowed, 17 yards per target. Not the best, but also not a big sample size. Utah did allow 31 points, but they didn't get run on very much. Only 3.2 yards per carry, 64.1 PFF grade. I'll take it. And the final linebacker we got here is Jay Higgins of Iowa. We've talked about him before. 8 tackles, half a tackle for loss, 1 pick, a pass defensed. Got targeted twice, didn't allow any receptions. And Iowa only allowed 13 points, 3.8 yards per carry, not even 100 rushing yards, 82.5 PFF grade. And there was even the Alabama guy, Geod Campbell, had an okay game. I could have put him here, but he didn't make the cut. So not a bad week for linebackers. And then we got safety. Safety, and everybody here this week is a safety, so we're not doing the nickel corner thing. But we do have one new name here, and then everybody else we're a little familiar with. First guy, Malachi Moore of Alabama. Now, Alabama doesn't really deserve any praise right now, but at the same time, I think we have to acknowledge that, look, it was because of the offense. If anything, a guy like a Malachi Moore should deserve some extra credit for trying so hard to get this done in this game with no help from the offense. 10 tackles, 1 for loss, which was a quarterback sack. Got targeted once, no completions allowed. Alabama's defense only allowed 17 points, 68 passing yards, 73.8 PFF grade. Seems like winning football to me. Not even 6 yards per pass. And, you put that on Oklahoma's miserable quarterback situation, but I think you got to give some credit to him for trying to keep Alabama in that game. He was one of their best defensive players, and defense was all they could do. Shiloh Sanders, interesting game. We haven't talked about him yet this year. Colorado. All over the field, 13 tackles, and he didn't get targeted in coverage once. That's good. But Colorado's defense got lit up for almost 40 points, and they did give up 9 yards per pass. Now, it was only 190 yards total. It's not that bad, but mixed bag from Shiloh. I don't know if you say this is good. I don't know if you say this is bad. I'd have to probably really study every single play in that game to really drill down there. But Shiloh Sanders is going to be a guy who gets drafted in all likelihood if he enters the draft. worth thinking about. 63.1 PFF. Billy Bauman Jr., we got to give credit to at least one Oklahoma defender for what they did to Alabama. That was so dominant by the OU defense against a... Look, I'm not going to say Alabama's offense is great, but they're not that bad. So somebody's got to get credit for it. Let's give some to Billy Bowman Jr. 5 tackles, a pass breakup, allowed 7 receiving yards on 3 targets, and only 3 points allowed. 164 passing yards to Jalen Milroe. And Jalen Milroe, I mean, he sucks. I get it, but 6.1 yards per pass. I mean, not every team in the league's doing that to him. 74.3 PFF grade. Andrew Makuba of Texas, welcome back. He remains one of my favorite sleepers. Extremely talented, just hasn't put it all together yet. 5 tackles and a pick and a pass breakup. 0 targets in coverage. Did not get targeted once. Texas only allowed 14 points, 211 passing yards, 8.4 yards per pass. 87.4 PFF grade. Super clean, super good stuff. And finally, we have Lathan Ransom, probably a third round, a day 3 guy from Ohio State. 4 tackles and he forced a fumble. Got targeted in coverage once and did give up a 19-yard reception. But, I mean, that was actually pretty much... I mean, well, I don't want to go too far with it, but that was like the only big passing play Ohio State allowed that whole game. 15 points, less than 70 yards passing. I think if you added sack yards in there, Indiana almost had negative passing yards on the day. 3.8 yards per pass, 75.2. So, I mean, Indiana's good. Again, Indiana's a good team. You hold them to 68 passing yards, I'm going to give you credit for it. All right, that's it for the defense this week. See you guys in less than an hour for the Hawks Nest stream. And one more week. Go Hawks.